So are we going to wait another moment for Jean?
Let's maybe do, I'll call her and see how close she is.
We have a quorum, she can join us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks, the proud home of the University of North Dakota. This is the special COVID meeting called by the Grand Forks City Council. This is a committee of the whole. We'll begin with welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Doppler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock. Kavani.
Here.
Sandy. Bean.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good, and I believe that Ms. Mock, Vice President Mock is on her way. Going back many months to when the country and our community began dealing with this pandemic, there were several meetings where I remarked on the resiliency of this community, that there are communities that will come out of this well prepared to take advantage of opportunities once the pandemic is over. That is not an inevitability. That'll depend upon our decisions, both as policymakers and as a community. At that same time, we recognized that it's not possible to separate our public health from our economic health, that these are inevitably entwined. Fortunately, we have civil institutions to help guide us through periods of this sort. I have, many people have remarked to me that they're surprised that this has become political. It's really not surprising during these very sharply divided times that such an important issue as how to respond to a pandemic and our rising numbers has become politicized. Nonetheless, as I've mentioned, we have civil institutions to help us deal with that. Tonight, we're going to be hearing in general from public health officials and from elected officials to help us make the best decisions moving forward. And with that, Mr. Phelan, if you would begin things with a discussion of the mayoral emergency orders and the City Council mask resolution, funding and administrative actions overview. Mr. Phelan.
Thank you, Council Member Weber and members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm going to team up on the first part with Maureen. She's going to talk a little bit about funding, and we've attached those documents. And also, we've had some Moody call, speaking of our bond rating and how the City of Grand Forks is performing. I'm not sure if she can say anything tonight, but we've had some really good conversations with Moody's, and that's really terrific to hear. Off of your words, Councilmember Weber, of our resilience, I think that's a really good point point to start. And I had an interview with Sam Easter, and he said, how do things look versus what we thought of in March? And I think in November, certainly we're having this third wave or this predicted second wave we were going to get. And if we were to tell everybody kind of where we are today and with all that we've been through, I think we would demonstrate once again how resilient this community is. And I was thinking back to many things. We've gone through a flood response this spring that we performed quite well in. We suffered through a terrible police shooting with Officer Holte and all the ramifications that came after that. We dealt with the George Floyd killing and all the gatherings, even in Grand Forks. And we should be very proud, from the officer shooting to the George Floyd aftermath, that we did have assembly, but we had peaceful assembly in our community, and not every community could say that. So we should be very proud, and we should be very proud of our police department that they built up a really great bank account with the citizens of Grand Forks so that they could do that. So I think that's another great thing that we've done along the way. Quietly, we've started up a new water treatment plant from June through September, without anyone really knowing about that as we move forward. I think, and we survived a mayoral city council transition in June too, and that was an anxious time too. And I think Maureen's going to talk about kind of where we're at business, but when I think through all of that we've been through in the midst of this pandemic, so when I was sitting here in March, we all knew administratively, and because we're the city administration, we try to be as apolitical as possible. We know politics enters into a lot of decision making, but when you think, we knew one thing, that we were going to have to sustain ourselves through this pandemic, and we couldn't have another disaster on top of the pandemic that we're doing. So when I just list through all the things that we've been through, and they've been peaceful, harmonious, and just have gone off without I'm proud on behalf of the city administration that's occurred. I'm proud that we've been able to maintain essential services throughout this year, to include a fall cleanup, to include leaf pickup, all the things that we've done, that we've never had to come here to the city council to say we really stubbed our foot on that service, or we weren't able to, that we could focus on this moment. So I'm really proud of the city administration and all the men and women that work for the city of Grand Forks. I think even on the pandemic response, we've dealt with three waves, and the early wave was highlighted by LM Wind Power, and thankfully we worked with LM Wind Power. We got them back going in their manufacturing. We had lots of discussions with LM Wind Power and with GE, and I think they've had a heartfelt thanks for the city of Grand Forks to help them through that time. That was the first wave. Second wave was school startup, UND and Grand Forks Public Schools. We've gotten through that, and now we're in the midst of this ongoing third wave that is probably the toughest one we've faced so far, and we got to keep soldiering on and keep staying positive. And I think to your comment, Councilmember Weber, we have had a locally driven strategy, and if you think about the institutional partners meetings that we have on an ongoing basis and the communications, we never needed Governor Burgum to come to Grand Forks to set up a task force in Grand Forks, because we already were doing that under Mayor Brown and under Mayor Buczynski. That was another great thing that we've done in advance, and we didn't have to have it come from up high from the governor's office. We have worked a public health strategy, and so one of the best things we've done, and you think about our public health, about the contact tracing, all that they've done, and so we really staffed up in that area so that we could have local control on contact tracing. Not every community did that, and I think some of the ones that are suffering right now the most didn't have the robust contact tracing that we've had. Our partner at UND also staffed up on contact tracing. I think that was another great thing that we did moving forward. One thing that I heard, and I don't know if I've shared this with City Council, but we had a meeting with, and Megan Compton from Ultra to speak to this, we had a discussion about how do we increase testing capacity in Grand Forks through Ultra, how do we increase analytic testing in Grand Forks, and what General Dorman told us, who was kind of the task force leader on behalf of Governor Burgum, is that no other health system has done what Ultra Health System has done in Grand Forks. From their hotline to the testing to the analytics, no other health system has done that in Grand Forks, so we owe them a big debt of gratitude. So much so, I think when we start talking about CARES funding, to be frank, I took it for granted that they were always supposed to do that. And they've spent, I'm sure, $1 million plus on behalf of the community, unreimbursed, to do all that. And I think we need to look at the CARES funding and how we can support them moving forward. The mass testing at UND, even including our own firefighters, because they were EMTs, how could we support that? So I think we've been all in on a local level and have performed better. And I know sometimes people criticize Governor Burgum, but we went to Governor Burgum and his administration and said we needed local funding from the CARES funding, and they delivered that. They delivered it through the police payroll, and it was a really great move. The fact it was proportionally funded throughout the state. Number two, that it was already expensed, meaning that we didn't have the end of year deadline. Now we have a flexible spending and not bound to the end of the year, and I think that's another huge thing that we went to the governor and that he's delivered. And even when they ran out of money, they reappropriated some money that we're going to get to the end of the year. So Maureen will talk a little bit about that. We're expecting another $3.4 million on that. And through all that, we've supported our private sector, highlighted by Red River Biorefinery. On top of that, dealing with that issue moving forward. Most of the executive orders that are in front of you have dealt with how can we staff, limiting spending, those sorts of things, doing hybrid meetings and the like. So we have all the opportunities to kind of really manage the city in a more flexible state, and we've done that on a day-to-day basis. And I think the most recent ones were that we've delivered on an executive order, or the bar closing opportunities, some of the mask orders in public buildings, and those sorts of things. The final one I want to address is the one that the mayor signed this afternoon, that I think at the end, Councilmember Weber, we could probably have some more discussions on that. But we did follow up as in trying to look at capacities, trying to look at the smart restart and what further things do we need to do in categories, and then to provide some further enforcement. We did reach out to public health and ask, where are the areas where there's community spread? And there were 4 categories: bars, restaurants, special events, and sporting activities, including youth sports. So we focused this order that the mayor has signed this afternoon in those areas. We looked at capacity. Right now, we're in a North Dakota restart level where we should be at 25% capacity in bars and restaurants. The order provides for a 50% capacity, and there's a big but on that. But the mayor's already included an 11 p.m. closing. That's not thought of as part of when they do that's another reduction on that 50%. In that order, there's no standing, dance floors, et cetera, so we're going to reduce capacity in addition on that. There are no table games like blackjack and that sort of thing moving forward with this order. And then there is a caveat of 500 or more. They need some special permissions and reviews by the public health. And for the most part, I've been a part of that, but they've been mainly driven by Alara Center, larger events where we've taken a look at that. We've debated that 500 and we set at the 500. We did this in confirmation with obviously city administration, but also with the county, because I know Dr. Walls is on. I think Dr. Walls is looking at doing a similar order outside the city of Grand Forks for capacities. And so I think you'll see not the same thing, but a very similar order for capacities in similar areas than what you see with the one that Mayor Buczynski signed. Later in the evening, I think also Dr. Walls is looking at a mask order too that may encompass the city of Grand Forks, but that's a separate order from the capacity one. I think the capacity one will be very similar in the county. So we've tried to synchronize that. The mayor has had conversations, and I've had a couple with, we'll say, the bar and restaurant industry. They've been hurt the most in this pandemic. And you should know when we have conversations with this particular economic area that they understand why we're doing what we're doing. But they want to know, again, that this is tough on them, and they understand. And so as we've discussed with them, we have discussed we're going to receive additional CARES funding. We've received 3.6. We think we're going to get around 3 million plus in the next rounds going through December. That above and beyond what we're working on with public health and making sure they're staffed in the new year, above and beyond all true health system in Grand Forks Public Schools, and we've talked about mental health. They would like us to consider, and the mayor would like to bring this back to U.S. City Council when we start allocating, looking at small business that has been impacted the most by this pandemic, similar to what the governor has done with some of the CARES funding. And so we kind of target it and laser it, just like we're doing these orders and limiting business, that we do in a similar vein with some of the CARES funding that's going to come our way, whether it's bars, restaurants, or the charitable gaming and those sorts of things that we're impacting by these orders. So that's some of the information they had on that, and we will continue to bring you further information on that. So with that, Councilmember Weber, I would turn it over to Maureen Storsett, our finance director, give you an overview of where we're at, which is another great story. I don't think anyone would have predicted where we're at financially back in March, and I'd hand it over to Maureen, please.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Ms. Storstad?
Yes, thank you, Todd. Committee members, can everybody hear me okay?
We sure can. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. So Todd, thank you. You did a really good job tonight and Monday going through those first two attachments that you have on your agenda, regarding the different programs with COVID and the funds that we're looking at and how the tracking sheet is coming through, and we are tracking all those different programs. Second attachment shows you some of those direct expenses, but due to the interest of time, I was going to go more with you through the third attachment. I'm going to share my screen here and go through that with you. But as always, you can always send me your questions too if you have more additional questions on top of what Todd spoke about with those first two attachments as well. I'm going to share my screen here for a moment. All right, hopefully you see the third quarter budget performance report in front of you.
Yes, that's what we're seeing. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So what I put together here, just that I'll just review briefly with you, is how things are coming in as compared to budget. This isn't looking at how we're looking at revenues compared to 2019 actual, but this is truly how we budgeted the year to go, the original adopted budget compared to how things are coming in here on the year. And Todd referred to this earlier, but we did just recently have a rating call with Moody's. I can't share a final report with you yet, but to let you know, we have had very good conversations with Moody's, and I expect a favorable rating with that. That should come out yet, hopefully the end of this day, that I can share with all of you what that rating is. But a lot of the discussion is because we're performing pretty well here financially through this COVID pandemic. What I'm giving you here is just a highlight of revenue and expense for our general fund and our four major utility funds. Overall, the general fund is looking pretty good. Expenses in total are at 72% of budget, and revenue in total at 92% of budget. What is inflating the revenue here a bit is, as you can see in the middle of about halfway down to the revenue section here is quite high compared to budget. That's because that's where that original $3.6 million of CARES relief funds have come in, which was based on a reimbursement of that law enforcement payroll. So when I take that 3.6 million out, though, we're still performing very well on the revenue side in general fund. We're about 83% of budget. You can see I broke it out into some major categories here on the revenue side. Of course, we want this to be greater than 75% of budget, as we're 75% of the year, because the biggest portion of this being property tax, and that comes in your first quarter of the year. So that is normal. Revenue that we've been tracking a little bit more, and we've talked about our more volatile revenue streams during this pandemic, is sales tax being one of them. And as you can see here, we're 75% of the year, and we're at 79% of budget on sales tax. So I wouldn't have expected this when we were sitting down in March, April timeframe to show this to you, third quarter through the year, that we're performing to date pretty well there on sales tax collections. State aid, that is another volatile revenue source. That isn't coming in quite as great as our sales tax. As you can see, and this is about halfway down on that revenue, we do receive that quarterly. We've received 3 quarter payments on state aid. We're at 67% of budget here. So we'll continue to monitor that. That revenue stream's down about 12%. But locally, our sales tax dollars are coming in very good. Going down the line there, you know, not to alarm you with alcohol and the restaurant license fees, that we just normally would now bill out renewals, and that revenue stream would normally come in the December month. Building permits is the good news story. We were at one time expecting maybe to be short a budget on building permits. We're actually performing quite well. We're ahead of the game and looking at a 5-year average, and we're at 110% budget there. Fines and forfeitures, we're down a bit. In total, we're only at 43% of budget. Franchise fees, pretty good overall, but the cable franchise fee is a bit short of budget. We're 75% of the way through the year, and collections are at about 65% of budget. But overall, I'm happy with where the general fund revenue is at this point in the year. And I don't expect any major surprises going on to the end of the year. And then as far as expenses overall, like I said, we're at 72% of budget. We're 75% of the way through the year. We've broken this out by category for you. We did expect, and we've purposely been trying to show some savings here. We've really been cutting back. Departments have been very good watching the line here. Just by matter of pandemic, and we're not going to travel as much due to restrictions, but we do have some savings in other areas as well. Wages and wages are on track, 73% of budget. There's some overtime expenses that are increasing our totals here, but figuring that into a reimbursement from some of those care relief funds. Most of those overtime comes from the area of public health and our fire department. Benefits, they're on track. We're at 80% of budget, but that makes sense as we have a annual lump sum payment for a defined benefit pension that comes out of here that inflates that money or that budget a bit, but overall, we're on track with our benefits budget. We do see savings in other areas of the budget with materials and supplies at 63% of budget. Within that category, you have diesel. Diesel fuel, we're at 53% of budget on the year, and gas at 44% of budget. So we expected and we do see some savings there. Utilities, we're at 63% of budget with electricity at 64%, and building heat make up this. Building heat is at 46% of budget. Capital, we're at 88% of budget. But also included for a reference is just a quick, well, once again, just general fund, no big concerns here, and this is kind of the story we told Moody's. We're able to control the situation. We may not come to total revenue budget, but we also have some savings on the expense side as well. So overall, we're sitting pretty good. And then we just did a quick overview of our major utility funds for you, just to show you in total revenue and expense on each of these major funds. With sanitation revenue, about 72% of budget, with the expense at 73% of budget. Wastewater, total revenue, 80% of budget with expenses at 74%. Water's currently only at 63% of budgeted revenue, but that is okay because we just haven't made the internal transfer between funds on the sales tax allocation that will come into the water fund from our water streets sales tax fund. And then water expenses are at 81%. Some of the higher expenses in water was just running 2 water treatment plants at the same time, brought up some expenses there. And then finally, our stormwater fund looks pretty healthy, 75% of the year. We're 75% on revenue, and on expenses, 67%. So that will just hopefully give you an overall view of some of our major funds that we monitor and wanted to report back to you. But of course, I'm here for questions if you would have.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Dorstad. With the consent from committee members, we'll hold off on motions or major discussion until the end, but we'll take clarifying questions along the way. Are there any clarifying questions for Ms. Dorstad at this time? If I may very quickly, this is a lot of news that points to the fantastic potential that this community is one that will emerge from the pandemic well situated to take advantage of opportunities. The sales tax is a particularly happy bit of news, especially because, Maureen, I'm guessing the fourth quarter is normally our strongest quarter of the year. Is that correct?
Is correct. So generally, there's a little bit of heavier sales tax, with your season coming up here. A lot of times it seems like you're heavier in maybe a spring month when people are doing their landscaping spring projects. You see another maybe increase in the fall when you have the student population moving here, and then maybe another large collection month in January that shows, the impact of the last couple of months. It seems like the dollar amount most recently over the past, I'd say, 5 months has been more of a consistent monthly collection. So we'll continue to monitor and see how it comes in going forward.
Very good. Even if it stays on pace, we're well ahead of where we would have expected to be at this time. I know the citizens have a lot of concerns about retail in the city. The mayor and the JDA are taking some very proactive steps in that direction. So some good news there. Can you clarify for me, under the enterprise funds, BOD, TKN, TSS surcharges, that's out of a line?
Yeah, those are, and maybe Todd might actually be better to speak to these type of charges. But this has come in front of you a little bit with the extra charges through the RR, Red River BioRefine and Simplot. So some of those charges, we did have some increased billings for some of those issues that we're running through that utility fund.
All right.
Yeah, council member, those are otherwise known as strength charges. So on the wastewater side, we charge base rates, flow rates, and strength charges. And generally, only industry pays strength charges. And as you recall, Red River BioRefinery, we cut them a break, but still they were going to pay their fair share, I think, as part of that.
All right, thanks for that. So overall, what we see here is some unexpected, as you said, back in March of this year, it would have been very difficult to predict that we'd be in such good shape economically at this time. And that's wonderful, and it's an important way to begin the evening. But of course, we also have some very serious issues and concerns to deal with tonight. I believe the next item is an update from Altru Health System.
Yep.
So is Ms. Compton with us?
Yeah.
I am.
Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Weber and the committees of the whole. I appreciate you allowing me to come back. I am going to share my screen. I think I'll do it successfully tonight. Can you all see that?
It looks real good tonight. Thanks, Megan. Yes, please.
Great. Well, thank you for having me back. I, again, will introduce myself, Megan Compton, Chief Clinic Operations Officer at Altru, and we just want to give a brief overview of where we're at today in comparison to where we were at the beginning of the week. So like many of you know, we have seen a lot of different waves or different things going on as it relates to COVID from the beginning, or since we started really working through a majority of these issues back in March. And since March, all kinds of things have changed, including the number of inpatients we're seeing, the number of employees that we may see going out on leaves because of COVID-related reasons. So tonight, we just want to give a brief overview or an update on where we're at on two of those issues, one of them being testing and one of them being hospital capacity. So you can see, I hope, a good view of what it looks like at our new curbside location. So as a reminder, we were serving our curbside patients or seeing those patients for testing needs at our family medicine residency program on the university's campus. And as winter approached, we knew that we needed to find a different location, and so partnered with the city, Todd and the mayor, and and came up with a much better place for the winter climate at the Alaris Center. So you can see here, what we're able to do is to have run 2 lanes of cars through there with 30 cars in the building at one time. We were able to increase the hours of operation, so not only are they not working in the winter, but they're not working in the dark, and increase the testing on Saturday mornings as well. So we started, yesterday was our first official day. You can see that we had a lower number of tests completed yesterday than we had the previous Wednesday. So the previous Wednesday, we were closer to 400 tests being completed, but we're pretty sure that's related to the holiday. And then we had 462 hotline calls. So I checked in this afternoon just to get a sense of where we were this afternoon. Again, things going very smoothly. They've had an incredible amount of help from the Alaris staff on logistics, and you can get a good visual here of how clean and easy it is for patients to get through there. We had by 3 o'clock today had tested 270 and had about 400 calls to our hotline by noon this afternoon. So we're seeing those numbers come back up a bit, but would like to see them hover closer to where we've been in the last couple of days as comparison to where we were last week. The one thing that we just want to make sure people still understand is that this testing is scheduled. So it isn't something where it's not the same as the mass testing that's happening at the university. This is intended for those who are symptomatic, who are on the hotline and then having their appointments scheduled to come through our curbside. So it's working really well. We're pretty excited about it. I know the staff are also really excited about it and have felt that there's been really great benefit to moving here. So want to thank you all again for that. In addition to that, I talked a little bit about it on Monday, but just want to also reiterate that not only are those testing locations open, but that our express care options are available to patients as well. And the benefit of this is we can get patients in timely in 4 different locations within the Grand Forks and East Grand Forks area or the community. And then we've got hours of operation that help. It's not 24/7 like our emergency room, but it certainly expands the majority of the daytime hours to try to keep the non-emergent cases out of the emergency room. So at our express locations, you will have an appointment, but in addition to that, if the provider feels like the conditions that you're presenting with require a test, then they will also test you there. So I'll jump to the hospital inpatient side and talk a little bit about a capacity update. So this is a slide that I presented on Monday. I'm just going to show the same graph as we did because not a lot has changed, at least in relation to what we're seeing as an increase in the number of COVID inpatients really since the beginning of October. So up until the first week of October, I had mentioned earlier in the week that the most that we had seen on the inpatient side at one time for COVID positive patients was 10. On Monday, we were up to 44 at one point in time. I think by the time I had gotten to City Council, we were down to 41. But as of today, we are down to 34 total COVID inpatients with 114 non-COVID inpatients. And then you can see at the bottom, you can see that 29 of them are on our general medical floor, 4 of them being in critical care and 1 of them in observation. So I think this is positive news. We're happy to see this decrease from Monday when we were at 44 patients, but we wouldn't consider this a trend quite yet. As we've talked about before, usually inpatient stays are a lagging indicator. And so while we still see a higher number of positive tests throughout the community, we anticipate that we won't continue to see a trend coming down yet. But I think with all of the work that the city is doing and others, the changes that they're putting in place, I think we anticipate that we'll start to see these numbers head in the right direction, but certainly want to stay closely connected to all of you and keep you updated on where we're at. So in addition to that, we have received some questions about our ability to accept patients, particularly from the region. And just as before COVID, we're constantly evaluating and receiving calls from the region with patients that have a variety of different conditions. We're always evaluating the best place for them to go, whether it's to be cared for at Altru, or if it makes more sense for us to work with those patients or those regional critical access hospitals to send them to another location. And there's a lot that goes into those kinds of decisions. It could be our capacity at the hospital. Another thing could be the condition that the person is in. But what we're really wanting to stress is that anyone with any sort of serious condition, or that feels like they have an emergency, we want to see them come into the emergency room, and we certainly don't want them to delay their care. So that's something that we continue to stress because it's really important. We've heard anecdotally, and we've heard stories about patients who are trying to free up beds for others, but we want to make sure everybody understands that we want to care for everybody, and if there's some reason that we're not able to, we will help to coordinate where those patients should go. And as I mentioned earlier this week, some of the resources or the things that we've been thinking about since the beginning, since March, has been what are our number of hospital beds, what kind of PPE do we have available to us, what kind of medications are available, and are there any shortages that we need to be concerned about, ventilators, testing kits, and staff. So we feel pretty good about all of those. As I had presented on Monday, we were seeing some concerns as it related to testing. We've had good conversations with General Dorman at the state as well as others. We haven't received those test kits yet, but continue to work with the state and believe that they will be coming in the next few days. The one thing that still remains in red is staff, as we do see a fair amount of staff still out for COVID-related reasons. As many of you probably know, the governor did lift the restrictions on COVID-positive, asymptomatic employees coming back to work on the COVID unit. So we're closely evaluating this as an option, but have not yet moved on this in this direction. We don't currently have asymptomatic positive staff working in the COVID unit. And I think for us, if we were to move in this direction, we would only do so with those that were volunteering to come forward. We certainly don't want to bring anybody back that's not comfortable and would respect their choice to decline in the event that they would want to do that. In addition to that, there are a number of safety precautions that need to go in place in order for us to keep the staff and the patients safe in the event that we were to move forward with bringing COVID positive asymptomatic employees back to work. If we were to do that, there are a number of different precautions that would go into place, and we would be prepared to do that. So as I mentioned, as of now, we'll not be implementing this. However, there are a number of triggers that could cause us to do so. So it could be an increase in the number of positives that come into the inpatient setting. It could be an increase in the number of staff that are required to quarantine. We are also preparing for a number of things that could happen, one of them being school closures and parents needing to be home with their school-aged children. So this did impact us in the spring, and as we prepare for that to potentially impact us in the coming weeks or the coming months, we do see that we may have to evaluate that option to bring asymptomatic nurses back into work in the COVID unit. We may need to evaluate that a little bit more closely. So I will pause there to make sure that I leave time for all of you to ask questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Compton. Any clarifying questions from committee members? Katie or?
This is,
yes,
this is Ken. So one of the questions I have is, are you still doing electives? I mean, are they elective surgeries, any of those that require people to stay in the hospital, or those that do same-day surgeries, are they all continuing as normal? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I sure can. So as of right now, we are continuing to do electives and procedures that require patients to stay in the hospital. As you probably know, the procedures that require people to stay in the hospital are typically procedures that we consider to be more urgent, or if we were to wait, may cause some level of harm over a period of time to the patient. So we're evaluating that very closely and know that that too is a trigger that we may have to pull in the event that we see a significant increase in inpatients that are requiring us to look at staffing needs a bit differently. But as of right now, we have not stopped our elective procedures.
Okay, a couple of others. We've known for years that there's been a shortage of nursing. I mean, it's just not been there before this, and I'm sure that exists today. One of my concerns has always been staffing, having the number of staff that we need, or that you need to be successful. How are you accommodating that? Have you had to go on diversion at all, or have you been able to do everything with the staff that you have, and are you projected? I know you had a little bit of concern having to do with the school system, which would be a big issue for us. But how is that part going with the staff?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So it has been tricky, and we have gotten creative as we think about different ways to move nurses in and out. So I'll give you a couple different examples. Where we see that there might be an opportunity or a decrease on the outpatient side in volume, we can pull a nurse from the outpatient side and bring him or her in to partner with a nurse on the inpatient side. So they may not have the experience, or it's been a few years since they've worked in the inpatient world. And so instead of allowing them to take a full load of patients on their own, we would partner them with an RN in the system who has been working on the COVID unit, or who has been working on one of the other floors, and they're really team nursing, so to speak. Another option for us is we have nurses that are working throughout the system in non-clinical areas. So they may be able to support those inpatient nurses in a different way as well. Maybe we pause or think about some of our electronic medical record work. We have a number of clinical folks working over there. So we may pause that and ask if they're willing to step in and support that inpatient team as well. And we've had really good support from our teams throughout the rest of the organization, nurses stepping up and volunteering to come in and support, as well as APP, so advanced practice nurse practitioners, for example, who at one point in time maybe works within the inpatient setting, have been able to step in and support that team. And in addition to that, CRNAs. So CRNAs are part of the anesthesia team. They too have the skill set to jump in and help on that inpatient side as well. So it certainly is it continues to be a challenge, but we feel like the pool of people that we're able to work with throughout the system, so far we've been able to manage that.
Okay, well, that actually sounds like good news, like you're on top of that, so that's good to hear. The last question I have is a concern that I have that maybe goes beyond you, but Michael Dulitz talked about the doubling effect, what's going on as you look at the curve, and when we expect our potential COVID numbers to go up and double again. Do you have any concern with that, and are you prepared should this double?
So I'll let Michael Dulitz talk about that. However, I do think it's a good question, and it's something that we do want to be prepared for. So as we think about what we can do and some of the things that we're going to need to put in place, I think we feel better knowing that we've got a strong partnership with the city and the other institutional partners, and that together we can, as some of those things start to escalate, that we can work together to pull some of those triggers. So one of them being early closures or mask mandates, for example. Some of the other things that I think will continue to help us slow the spread so that we're not seeing it double again.
Well, I'm very hopeful of the same thing, so let's hope that happens.
We'll see what happens tonight. Yes, Mr. Gavami?
Yes, I just had a quick question. What was your turnaround time, or what does your turnaround time look like for testing right now?
So we work with this Department of Health, and all of our testing goes to them. So while we administer the test, or we're the ones to test the patient themselves, that test kit then goes to the state, and they're the ones that they have the analyzer, and they're resulting that test. So it really changes, and it can be different day to day. Right now, I believe we're at about a 48 to 72 hour turnaround time.
Thank you.
Very good. And Vice President Mock or Councilwoman Doctor, any questions? Ms. Compton?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, very good. Ms. Compton, the testing is such an important part of our response to all of this and attempts to manage it. The drive-through testing, what are we doing for people might be taking the bus or some form of taxi or even a bicycle? How are they accommodated by the drive-through testing?
Sure, that's a good question. And my understanding is if they call the hotline will accommodate them. So if there's a need to come into the Alerus Center and they're not in a vehicle, that they'll find a way, the nurses will find a way to work with them to make sure that they're able to be tested.
And how did they get the number for that hotline?
So the hotline number is posted on our website.
All right, very good. And you noted that currently 34 COVID patients down from Monday, but this is a lagging indicator. I asked on Monday, I'll ask again today, regional resources, what's our ability to access those? I doubt that that's changed much from Monday, but if you could respond to that.
I sure can. So it stays the same as Monday. As I mentioned on Monday, the critical access hospitals are also full or are experiencing their own increase in COVID numbers. There is a pool of nurses that was available through the state. We did apply or went through an application process, and our application was denied because they're comparing us to the other larger health systems in the state, and we have better staffing ratios than a number of the other health systems in the state. So the challenge about that is that we weren't able to receive those resources. I'd say the good news is it does show that we are in a better position than some of our neighboring communities or some of the other larger communities in the state of North Dakota.
It's kind of a good news, bad news story, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. I appreciate this. It's repetitive, but I don't think it's redundant. So I'm hoping that we will continue to hear from you on a regular basis. I appreciate you taking the time and all true support as we weigh these heady matters. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I think, we continue to look at treatment options. Every week there's better and better news as it relates to ways that we can treat patients and care for them in a non-inpatient setting. So we continue to work pretty aggressively on what our options are. And I think it would be really helpful for me to be able to come back and speak about that as we have better and better news as it relates to that.
Yes, again, even if it's repetitive, I think it's important for us to be aware of this information, and it's not redundant in any way. So yes, you're welcome to every council meeting. Yes, please. And with that, anything further tonight then? Ms. Compton, or questions from Ms. Compton?
Not for me unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Good to see you, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, City of Grand Forks staffing overview. Ms. Bouvet.
Good evening, Councilmember Weber and members of the committee. I've provided a brief overview on how the pandemic is currently affecting departments and staffing across the city. I'm not going to go through each department and what was written and attached to the agenda. However, I will say that overall, city departments and staff have been doing an excellent job of maintaining operations and maintaining flexibility with staffing. When this pandemic started in March, departments implemented a variety of safe staffing measures and had made plans for each department and how they would handle staffing changes and challenges when the time came. From March through September, we had about 14 positive staff cases, and in the last 6 weeks alone, we've had 38 cases across all departments, so significant increase in the last 6 weeks. But even with the increase in numbers, we've seen very, very little spread in the workplace. In the few cases where spread was suspected, we have ensured that the risk was mitigated, and that was no longer a concern. Employees who are asymptomatic positive or quarantine who can work from home do work from home. And city employees want to be in the workplace, and when they have to be away from the workplace, when quarantining and isolating, they return as soon as they're able. The vast majority of our employees that are testing positive for COVID are appearing to contract it from a close contact or a household contact or from an outside or special event. Not in the workplace. One other thing I'd like to address is on Monday, Councilmember Weigel had mentioned our police and fire and how they're serving the community and working with the public on a daily basis. If you remember at the start, WSI implemented a claims acceptance for any COVID-related claim. We have had 38 exposures, potential exposures, since March, but not one of those cases have resulted in a positive. So that's good news, and our PPE is working. That's all I have. If you have any additional questions, I'm here to answer them.
That's kind of an amazing story there at the end, yeah. And we enjoy a dedicated workforce here, and that can't be repeated too often. Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bouvet from committee members? Thank you, Tanji.
Thanks.
Then dashboards update from Mr. Doulis.
Just going to share my screen here and go back one slide. Chair and members of the council, my name is Michael Dulitz. I'm the Opioid Response Project Coordinator at Grand Forks Public Health during normal times, and the COVID-19 data guy, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, during COVID times. I'm going to provide a short update based off of the dashboard. I'm going to try and give you a little bit more variety and not repeat the update you just got a couple of days ago.
Michael, we're not yet seeing your screen, if you need to share your screen there with us. There we go. Well, it's coming up. There we go. Thanks.
Thank you. Looking at our dashboard, we have had a slight change since Monday in our dashboard. There has been a slight decrease in the overall score, but not a change in the overall color on the dashboard. So the decrease happened with the decrease in the percent change on COVID cases. So again, when we look at the percent change, that's kind of the slope of the line for the new cases of COVID, and that has decreased over the past couple of days, which has resulted in our score going down to 2.3, which is just barely into the red category. The reason why the case counts went down. It may be a decrease in cases. It may also be potentially due to a error, or not really an error, but a slowing of the testing capacity through one of the contract labs that the state uses. That was delaying the results from being sent out. Overall, I think our number would have shown a little bit lower, regardless of those results, but we did see between a 3 and 5 day delay on some of our testing results for tests that were done at the end of last week. Comparing Grand Forks to other communities, Grand Forks this week has seemed to have a overall kind of lessening of the slope of our case line. And in some cases, our case numbers have been decreasing, whereas other communities have been seeing some increases. So Grand Forks had a decrease early in the week and has since leveled out a little bit. When we look at Ward County, they still continue to be increasing. When we look at Cass County, they've had a couple of very large testing days that have driven up their numbers. And Burley Morton has always seemed to have a relatively high and consistent case growth. We are still higher than the state of North Dakota's kind of average cases per capita. I just wanted to provide this as a quick reminder of where we're at. I know I talk a lot about cases per 10,000 in various age groups. I just wanted to remind everybody where we are still seeing a lot of the cases at. So in Grand Forks County, one of our biggest population groups is the 20 to 29 age group. Out of all the different 10-year age groups, the 20 to 29 age group is one of the largest ones in the community. And so they are still making up a majority of the cases that we're seeing in the community, followed by individuals of the working age, and then younger individuals. So, one thing to keep in mind is that even though sometimes I show a lot of our case rates growing at kind of the same regardless of the age group, there still are age groups that are disproportionately kind of contributing to the overall case burden in the community. Like I discussed earlier in the week, we've had increases in the 60-plus age group. They make up a relatively small part of the age of the community. The 80-plus age group only has about 2,500 people in it in Grand Forks County. But when we see that growing at the same rate as other age groups, it still is concerning for us, even if there's only 36 cases. Looking at our testing, the decrease in testing earlier in the week in the serial testing kind of confirms what I had discussed about having an issue with one of the labs where we were seeing delays in tests coming back. So that did decrease our serial testing and did send down our testing numbers a little bit earlier in this week, and also may have contributed to the decrease in case numbers. Looking at our cumulative incidence of cases, we did we have seen still increases in our case counts, but the curve is bending just a tiny bit. One thing I did want to point out though, I did show this slide earlier in the week. One thing I did want to point out is that in 39 days between September and late October, we had 2,065 cases in 39 total days. We've now had 2,056 cases in 14 days. So again, this is a way for us to kind of reiterate that doubling effect. I hope that we can start to bend this curve out a little bit so we can kind of lengthen out this doubling. But it is certainly concerning that we've kind of matched those case numbers in such a short time frame. If we stayed on track as our previous case counts have kind of shown us, we would still be looking at potentially having a doubling in our cases, on approximately the week of Thanksgiving. That's if nothing changes again. Looking at our active hospitalization rate, again, we've been working on improving our data quality, and so we are feeling a little bit more, confident in what the data are showing. So looking at our hospitalization count per capita, unfortunately, that does also show the rapid rise by improving the way that our data is being reported. So we are now in second place in the of our peer counties looking at the hospitalization rate per 100,000. I also wanted to look out a little bit more, on more of a regional basis again. I've discussed this before, and then I've just been including my updates in kind of the additional slides, but I did just want to touch base on this because it has changed pretty significantly. North Dakota and South Dakota have been seeing pretty consistent rises in cases since looking into August, September, whereas Minnesota and Manitoba had stayed relatively low until recently. Minnesota has seen a slow increase in their cases, but now they're starting to get into that exponential part of a curve, whereas Manitoba has seen a recent increase in the number of cases and a relative plateau this week, but again, we don't know what could happen in the future. This has prompted some policy changes in both Minnesota and Manitoba, and so that may be a point of comparison for various policy options as you are considering policies and then reevaluating them in the future to know how these two neighboring states and states and provinces did handle COVID versus North Dakota, if we're looking for ways we can compare. Looking at testing, again, North Dakota and Grand Forks County are kind of biggest strength is our testing and our ability to get a lot of people tested and to get good testing acceptance in the community. South Dakota, their case numbers are likely, relatively similar to ours, but they, their testing performance has been very diminished compared to North Dakota. They haven't been able to do nearly as many tests as North Dakota has been doing in South Dakota. Minnesota has been slowly increasing their testing compared to North Dakota, and then Manitoba has opted, to put testing as a lower priority compared to other community mitigation efforts. So now seeing how that plays out with the percent positivity, South Dakota with their low testing counts has had really high percent positivity, and that has carried out for a fair amount of time. Minnesota has had a rising percent positivity. I suspect a decrease in that percent positivity that you're seeing over the past week may be due to a data lag or something like that, not necessarily a sudden change in in the trajectory. Manitoba has seen a relatively significant increase in their percent positivity with their low testing count and relatively high population. That does make me wonder if they maybe aren't testing enough. And again, they have made some recent policy changes to try and reflect that. And then finally, looking at hospitalizations, I don't have a good line for Manitoba, but they have about 200 hospitalizations in their province as of right now, in a province of about 1 million people. When we look at Minnesota, they have seen a relatively consistent rise in their hospitalization. South Dakota has seen a dramatic rise in their hospitalization numbers, and you can see that play out in their media and in in kind of the state decision making, whereas North Dakota is kind of falling in the middle. South Dakota, with this dramatic rise in hospitalizations, that does again prompt the question of whether or not they have enough testing. Our ability as a state to test well does give a lot of confidence in kind of the in our case identification abilities, as long as people are willing to get tested. And then my final slide, I just did want to compare, deaths between our neighboring states and provinces and North Dakota. North Dakota is unfortunately in the top spot as far as death rate recently, with South Dakota closely behind. Minnesota and Manitoba have seen increases as of late. North Dakota, likely has good, reporting on it, as do the other states. And in Grand Forks County right now, we do have 28 individuals who have unfortunately passed due to COVID. There was an increase by one this week, but I didn't see it reported out in our numbers. With that, I did attach some additional slides, including our dashboard slides to support any decisions you may make, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Could you pull up the slide with our current local dashboard, please, Michael? Questions from committee members? Michael, the last couple days, when I've seen the number, it seems to have been a happy number, especially in comparison to what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 weeks. However, As you noted, these have been low testing days, and there's been a backlog at the lab, 3 to 5 day delay, is that correct?
Yes, we have seen an isolated delay in some of the testing that was sent to a contract lab that the state uses in North Carolina. Generally, we see relatively good testing result times there. There was a pretty significant delay for a couple of facilities that were doing serial testing, so they saw a significant delay in the results. That does seem to have been relatively fixed. We have been seeing the same lab does the UND testing events. We have been seeing the results from the UND testing event coming in today, or what appears to be from the UND testing event coming in today.
Yeah, so that yellow box on new COVID-19 cases looks encouraging, but it seems reasonable to expect that those numbers are going to be going up over the next couple of days, and that this is an anomaly rather than a trend. So. And
I would say, maybe wait a week before you call it, a trend right now. If we, last Thursday we had 330 cases reported out, whereas today, we aren't hitting that number so far, but the day's not over yet. So even with trends changing, when you drop a big testing or a big result day or a big positive day out of there, that is going to probably keep that number low for a little bit of time as well.
So we'll all hope to see a downward trend over the next week, but that feels like wishful thinking at this moment, given the lab delay, et cetera. And it's clear we are currently in the red. Despite these changes, yes.
Yes.
The state dashboard is showing us as orange. Our local data shows us red.
Yes, and when we look at the state dashboard right now, we've maxed out all of the or both the percent positivity and the active case rate. I don't have that slide immediately available, but the only other thing that could change would be our testing. Right now, we'd have to go from doing about 8,000 tests a week to dropping below 2,000 tests a week before that would change. So, so it does appear that it would be a potentially subjective decision on moving Grand Forks into the red on that dashboard, because if we weigh all those measures the same and try and use a similar scoring methodology as I do, that would put us in the orange. If you weighted like cases higher and percent positivity higher, that would put us in the red. There is some question about how the governor's or the utility of the governor's dashboard, since it does seem to be so subjective.
This is something very important that you've just stated. So with our current stats, the only way that we would move on the state dashboard into red is if the state were to abandon its current strategy of testing, one of the things that we've been applauding all along. That's what it would take for Grand Forks to go into the red on the state dashboard. But our local calculations were clearly in the red.
Yes, with the caveat that, the state does, always include the caveat that it's ultimately up to them for their final discretion. But we've seen Ward County right now with percent positivities close to 30%, and they haven't moved their dashboard at all, even though they've had significant community impact as well.
Right. So a rate of 30% and still orange. That's just not consistent with what we know about this disease at this time, right? Questions from other committee members? I have some larger scope questions, but at this point, I just wanted to ask clarifying questions. Will you be with us for a little bit, Mr. Dulitz?
Yes, I will be here.
Very good. Anything further from committee members? Hearing none, the North Dakota Smart Restart Guidelines, this is a placeholder in the agenda for us to just have a discussion at this time. Mr. Phelan, please.
Again, Council Chair Weber, I did brief the mayor's new order this afternoon. that relates, so I did brief that previous, and so, as opposed to briefing that now. Number two, I would call on Dr. Walls, because Dr. Walls is looking at a similar, we'll say a facility reduction outside the city of Grand Forks, but in the county. He's also looking at a mask order that would not only be in the county, but within the city limits of Grand Forks. And I anticipated giving him an opportunity to provide a briefing on that. And then we would open it up for questions on whether it's Dr. Walls' order or Mayor Buczynski's order, and I'm available to answer any of those questions. And Mayor Buczynski is here also.
Mr. Phelan, what I mainly recall from the beginning was a really important setting of the context and a review of many of the things that we need to be thankful for in our community. I think I might ask you to review the mayor's new order, the new emergency order.
Sure.
But yes, let's move to Dr. Walls, our local health officer now. Dr. Walls, welcome.
Yes, I am here, and as far as what you wanted to discuss at this point, maybe you should rephrase the question, and then I'll try my best to answer.
Sure. Would you tell us what you're currently doing with the county?
With the county.
And what that means for us here in the city.
Sure. So most importantly, that would be the mask mandate that is in full progress. It hasn't quite reached that final draft, and so it will hopefully be available very soon and signed. I don't have a piece in front of me to share a screen. I think there might be one available that could be shared tonight. I think Mr. Phelan maybe has one. Is that so? In the draft form anyway.
Mr. Phelan's pulling that up, but continue.
Sure. I mean, it's...
Maybe I could ask Dr. Walls. I do have a draft, but I was not given the final word from the state's attorney to share it publicly. So Dr.
Walls, can you share that? Or?
If you could email it.
Thanks.
If you could email it to me, Dr. Walls, I don't know if you can do that now, and then I can share it. But I wanted to make sure you and the state's attorney, Wamstead, was comfortable with me sharing it. That's what the commitment I provided.
Sure. That might take a moment. I'm not, Mr. Technology, but, so yeah, it'd be weird for me just to read it out to you. I guess, it's I guess a communication piece here that I thought maybe it was going to be available, so I'm not really prepared to just read it, but it...
Council Member Weber, maybe I could go, if I could go to Plan B. Mr. Gosted, are you online? I know you have been going back and forth with State's Attorney Wamstead. Do you feel comfortable providing a briefing on the, we'll call it the mask order, and also what the county order would look like for facilities? If Dr. Walls is okay with you, just providing an overview of both of those orders that you're considering at this point in time?
Yeah, that'd be fine. It has a lot of legal language, so go for it, Dan.
Thanks. I'll paraphrase it, and because I think Mr. Phelan is correct, there was some hesitation in sharing the document, so I'll just paraphrase what I understand the terms of the face mask order would be, is that it parrots a lot in the resolution that the city council drafted. There are some nuances, but requires that anybody within an indoor public place wear a face mask or face covering, excuse me. And there's a defined term of face covering. It's a cloth face covering. At this point, I think there might be some additions to that. At least that's what I understand is being contemplated. And And a public place, as I reviewed it, it looked like it was a definition of a public place that is defined for purposes of the smoking statutes, indoor smoking statutes. So they used that definition. And I guess the other caveat is that you wear a face mask when physical distancing, where you can't keep 6 feet apart from somebody that's not within your household, which is within your same living unit. You'd have to wear a face covering. There are a number of exemptions that, again, I think they're not absolutely word for word in the city council resolution, but very similar. For example, if you have a medical condition, if you're engaging in a physical activity, or athletic activity, engaged in a religious activity, and I'm giving it in a very broad sense now. I won't go through each and every one of the exceptions. For if you're working and it's required to be taken off for working, it's a hazard to wear, or for surveillance, if you need to take it off to identify yourself. Law enforcement and emergency personnel are also exempt to the extent that it would interfere with their roles. In addition, because this is an order by the public health officer, there is a specific statute that provides that a violation of this, it's a state statute, a violation of this order is a Class B misdemeanor. And that's spelled out in the order as well. Dr. Walls, if I didn't paraphrase it, I didn't get it drilled down to everything, but I think that covers the bulk of it.
I'm particularly interested in knowing, is there an enforcement mechanism? You've touched on that. When is it in effect and when would it be over?
Well, it would go in effect when I sign it, I think, for the most part, to whatever date I put on it, and then it would be ended when I rescind the order.
Very good, thank you. And is there anything else, Dr. Walls, that you want us to know at this time?
No, I think that's probably adequate for, this part of the discussion, and I think you had other things to talk about. I mean, I can take questions, but I don't have anything more to add.
Real good. We're just taking clarifying questions at this point, but we're going to have a larger discussion, and I'm hoping you'll stick around. Mr. Kavami, did you have a question? Mr. Weigel, sorry.
Mr. Gosted and Mr. Walls, or Dr. Walls, you mentioned a Class B misdemeanor that is attached to this, and my understanding of the law is that could be punishable, not saying it will be, but could be punishable by 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. Is that correct?
I don't think it's 90 days.
Is it 30 days?
30 days.
30 days, okay.
And I don't quote me on the number. I think it's $1,500, up to $1,500, and up to 30 days in jail.
Perfect. I just wanted to clarify that because I understand Dr. Wall's urgency with this, and I understand that, but I do think that a Class B misdemeanor again, I will say that it is equal to the charge of prostitution. It is equal to the charge of driving under the influence of alcohol. And I understand that Dr. Walls has very limited tools in his toolbox, just because it is based on state law, where he couldn't say, I'd rather have it be an infraction. So I'm more in favor of working locally with what we have versus Dr. Walls signing this and implementing it and knowing that we could possibly be locking people up in jail for 30 days if it got that far. That's an extreme case. But we've worked in this body to decriminalize certain things as far as noisy parties and whatnot. To me, I don't think this fits in our realm of now criminalizing something along those lines. But
Very good. That's going to be a really important part of the discussion. Of course, I don't think Dr. Walls requires approval from the council for these decisions. I have a clarifying question. How would this interface with the current city council mask resolution?
I can certainly answer that. In the Century Code, it talks about, in the order itself is something that is issued by the public health officer. It's the effect of that order, the statute, that makes it a misdemeanor if you violate it. It's section 12.10105 talks about offenses having the full force and effect within the territorial limits and other jurisdiction of a home rule cities or counties. So because the effect of the violation of a public health officer order, it would have application within the city limits.
And so it's not Dr. Walls determining the penalty, that's just part of existing Century Code. If he makes an order, that's the penalty, is that correct?
The result of issuing the order carries with it the sanction under state statute.
Thank you, Mr. Gostin.
just one more.
Yes, Council Member Weigel.
Just so I can clarify, what are the ages this would affect? Obviously, anybody that's an adult, but as far as juveniles, how are we handling that? What is Dr. Walls' thoughts?
I'd put age 5 on the draft mandate, essentially to have that compliance for school, and we certainly don't expect that law enforcement is going to be taking any action on someone that young. However, that's the discretion of law office to do that.
I would just add, just real quick, culpability for crimes in North Dakota isn't until age 10. So technically it couldn't even be enforced at that point anyways, anybody under the age of 10. But I guess I do have that concern that if we're going to make it enforceable and truly make it enforceable, then we should make sure it aligns with our current law. Is there any way that we can exclude the city of Grand Forks from this?
I can answer that question if, Dr. Walls could craft the order in such fashion, but absent that, I believe that this order would have equal application for the reason I stated in the statute, and also he stands in the shoes. He's signing it, I guess, as the county public health officer, but he stands in the same shoes as the city. So I think it would have application within the city limits. Absent that carving it out.
Very good, and these are important clarifying questions. Thank you, Councilmember Weigel. However, Dr. Walls does not require our permission or our approval on this, and the penalty, this would be the maximum penalty, not a required penalty. That would be, who would that be up to determine the extent of the penalty, Mr. Gostad?
The judge presiding over the case. And obviously, you start with the prosecutor, and these would be prosecuted through the state's attorney's office. They would have discretion, and they could make certain recommendations to the judge as to what they think the penalty should be. But ultimately, the final say would be by the presiding judge.
So we wouldn't expect to see 11-year-olds automatically locked up for 30 days. There'd be discretion in this, yes?
Well, the juveniles are going to be conducted through juvenile court system, which is a little different than court system for adults.
Very good, thank you. We're gearing up for a deeper discussion here, but before we go into that, Mr. Phelan, would you give us a quick review of the mayor's recent emergency order? This came out, I believe, around 4 o'clock this afternoon, maybe a little earlier.
Yes, Council Chair Weber, and I'll also, since Dan's on here, I'll have him fill in any of the blanks. So we've been working over for the last few days regarding what to do next, regarding concerns regarding, yeah, we do have guidelines, how do we make them more enforceable and how do we make them more focused? And so we did follow up with public health and created categories where we think we have some issues out there due to the work that we've been doing on a day-to-day basis. And so this order is focused on bars, restaurants, it's focused on events and sporting activities is where we are seeing spread in our community, so that's why this order is that. And obviously, the flexibility the mayor has to adapt orders is significant, and that's why when we worked through this with Mayor Buchenska, we worked with him knowing that he has the maximum flexibility as part of his emergency powers. So with that, the order has the perfunctory factual findings and background. Again, I just let you know the 4 areas that we're seeing some community-wide spread. We also highlighted under 215, I'd point out where we already have existing orders that relate to this, whether it's the city resolution on face masks, whether it's community-wide or also in our public buildings that the mayor has already conferred. And then finally, the early closing for bars and restaurants at 11 p.m. And again, the 11 p.m. is not prescribed in the North Dakota Smart Restart, but that's something that we've done. State of Minnesota has followed our lead now, and they've gone down to 10 p.m., and others are doing that. So I think we were ahead of the game back earlier this year, and now we've put that back on. The other items, if you look on limitations of occupancy, we are focused on bars, restaurants, special event gatherings, sporting and gathering activities like that. So that's where that order is, and that's under the 3.3. 3.6 is the dance floors, and dance floors mean whether it's a business like a bar or whether it's a special event at the Alaris Center. So restricting that opportunity. No standing in bars and restaurants, for example, and so you need to be seated as part of this, unless you're entering or exiting or using the restroom. So trying to get, not only if there's seats, trying to reduce the capacity in that form and fashion. Also, 3.8 is, as I talked about, charitable gaming, reducing engagements regarding that. So we're reducing things like blackjack. We are also reducing games like pool tables, darts, areas that people are going to commingle. Number one, they're likely going to be standing. If you're playing pool or throwing darts, you can't stand and you're not going to be able to play darts. So we're reducing, again, the capacity that we can see within those areas. 3.10, I would point out, the mayor and I and others, we debated this with the county. We've created the max of 500, and if you look at 500, we set the capacity at 50%, but I really want to say, and we've said the 50% capacity while seated with all these other exceptions that you can do. So we think we're really down to the 25% plus or minus, especially with the reduction in hours. When people have been concerned about late night activities, and as we well know, from 11 to 2 is where a lot of bars do their business, and that's tough on them. And on top of that, if you look at 3.10, generally, this is set up similar to what we're doing with the Alaris Center, and so generally, the Alaris Center, through their own standard operating procedures, have certain event guidelines in the plethora of events that they do, and obviously the numbers that can be involved has gone down and down and down, and so what generally happens if there's the exception to the rule, the chair currently of the Alaris Center is Pat McLean, and myself as the city administrator, if there's something that's out of order or out of the norm, and Anna from the Alaris Center, the general manager, feels like they can do this event safely and securely, he and I review it, and we either give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down, and that's how it works. So we're setting that up in a similar vein. We looked at the 500, and I think when we talked to Dr. Walls in the county over the last couple of days, their order had the 500, so we're kind of syncing that number, and that's really set up for the Alaris Center or the Ralph Engelstad Arena, those kinds of large events. But we did debate whether that should be 250, 300, or 500. We went with 500, knowing that the mayor can always change those numbers along the way too. And then with that, I think 313 is an important one, where the mayor does have some flexibility on the punishment, and Typically, you would see an order that would have a $1,000 fine. The mayor chose in this vein, first offense would be a $500 fine. Second offense and those thereafter would be a $1,000 fine as part of that. And that was part of the punishment part of this. So 315 is an important one. Just so you know, we have weekly institutional partners meeting at least, but probably of all of our partners that we keep the most in touch with on a daily basis, it's All True Health System. And so you can see we're similar to Dr. Walls when he said to you, Mr. Weber, when will it start, when will it end? I would suspect what Dr. Walls was saying is that when he signs it, it's going to be effective, and when he decides he doesn't need it, he's going to make a determination. And I think the city and the county both determined under 315, let's not tie it to a specific dashboard that's not flexible and not adaptable and not meant for humans to make a final decision. But we are, as part of this, saying hospital capacity is a really big deal to us, among a lot of other reasons. And so that's kind of the standard of how this will be determined to change or to go away and that sort of thing. So with that, that's kind of a summary of what we've been working on. We're trying to tie this as closely as possible to the county so that we can sync this well together. And with that, if I could defer to our city attorney, Gosted, for any further words, and we'd certainly be willing to engage further.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Gosted, anything to add?
I really don't. I think Mr. Phelan went through it in detail. I've got nothing to add. I think he went through the highlights. I just was advised by Ms. Lomstead that we could share the draft of the face mask order if they wanted to do that. I'm not very good at this, but if the council wants to review it, I could pull it up and do I guess it's the screen sharing.
Mr. Gostick, could you email it instead?
Yeah,
I certainly can.
That'd be great.
And then Mr. Gossett, also email it to Greta, and she can then post it to the agenda.
Good idea, yes. Going back to March, it had been one of my hopes that the community could come together in a supportive way and find the mitigating measures necessary so that we could have Fighting Hawks hockey at the Ralph this season. The number 500, it's debatable, but it's hopeful, and I'm glad to see it there. However, overall, looking at the North Dakota Smart Restart and what we have here in the mayor's order, it seems that this is, with the exception of the innovation with the 11:30 closing time and some of the other steps, largely this is consistent with a yellow risk level on the Smart Restart. Certainly a number of these come from the yellow risk level.
I would say with the Smart Restart, Mr. Weber, if you look at them, usually the yellow and the orange are kind of combined, and so it kind of escalates. So I think these are orange, and they're also part of yellow. And generally, when you look in the guidelines, yellow gets incorporated into orange.
Yellow gets, so it's a hybrid of responses, yellow and orange responses. And yet, we've kind of established now with Mr. Dulitz, locally, we are in the red. So I'd like to ask Mr. Dulitz, Ms. Swanson, and Dr. Walls, what is it that we need to do to flatten the doubling? This is a really troubling trend. What do we need to do to flatten the doubling? And what are your recommendations? You're not elected officials. You're not in your roles to take the political heat. That's our job. But we're looking to you for these recommendations and for this expertise.
Mr. Weber, members of the council, this is Debbie Swanson, Director of Benfork's Public Health Department. We have long had concerns about the North Dakota Smart Restart guidance because it is simply that, it's guidance. So it doesn't give us a great deal of enforcement capability when we see things that are happening that might be possibly transmissible moments in our community. So any effort to tie things more closely to what is actually happening in our community, whether it's positivity rates or new cases or anything either on our dashboard or the state dashboard, would be greatly welcomed. I recognize the power of the mayor to issue orders and the health officer to issue orders. I think we have to start someplace, and so I could support this as a starting point, but I think that we need to really be looking at where things are in our community at the time that orders are issued and see if they're really appropriate. I did provide the information about the places we felt were most concerned based on our contact tracing cases we're seeing. And we also know that both the university and the school district have put in place a lot of measures that go beyond what you see here, especially as it relates to some of their mitigation and their social distancing and their mask wearing. So we felt like those areas are fairly well protected. I recognize the balance between public health and economic health, and that those are the things that you will have to struggle with and will be challenged with. But obviously, the more we can tie enforcement activities to what's locally happening in our community, the more likely we are to mitigate this until such time as we have a vaccine and we really have much less spread in the community. Right now, individuals are telling us they do not know where they contracted COVID. They tell us they're doing everything possible to protect themselves and their family, and yet still they're testing positive. So that tells me it's unmitigated spread in the community, and it does deserve some attention. The attention, I guess, will be up to you.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Dr. Walls or Mr. Dulitz, anything to add there at this time?
I think we're just trying to layer as many types of protection that we can, and so these two are pretty important ones, the mask and again, the capacity and limiting those activities where spread is occurring. I mean, you can go as far as, a total lockdown where, no one's really wanting to see that, and I don't think that's going to happen, but, what we did in March and April is, would be very effective to help us now, and again, I don't know that that's too likely to happen, but, those measures did keep the numbers down, so I don't know what we do with that, but.
Right. We must thank the state and feds for the support that we have received. It's been critical to our survival here. But we need to take responsibility for ourselves, especially as the state and national government deal with their own COVID challenges and other unprecedented issues. I'll note that in the governor's Smart Restart, I'll just quote from compliance, risk levels in the statewide color-coded health guidance system provide situational awareness to help make informed decisions and adjust guidelines for businesses and event planners in order to prevent further spread and impact of the virus in communities, especially among vulnerable populations. And here's, I think, a particularly important statement. Recommendations are intended to supplement and not replace local mandates. All local mandates must be followed. Clearly, the governor of the state is looking to communities such as ours to step up and take responsibility for ourselves. Councilmember Weigel, you had a statement?
Just maybe a couple quick questions.
Please.
And for Dr. Walls or Ms. Swanson or Mr. Gosted, what authorities does Grand Forks Public Health have in order to enforce ordinances or violations of law? What can public health currently do?
I can answer that question, and I'm looking at trying to find the ordinance. I think the enforcement mechanism isn't necessarily through public health, but it's through law enforcement.
So even when we've had issues with property abatements, is that through law enforcement or is that through public health?
It's, well, in the one that I was involved with recently, it was a public health board that ultimately issued the decision for the abatement.
And Mr. Weigel and members of the council, that is under the broad authority of boards of health under Century Code, and that was used because of that broad authority. We typically don't use that within the city, we use the city codes. And there are a number of things that we do enforce relative to food safety, a whole variety of things. So we There are, though, many, many circumstances that we do rely upon law enforcement. And I do just want to reiterate that law enforcement does have discretion first. If we talk about those layers, the first layer of enforcement is law enforcement, the second layer is prosecution, and the third, of course, is the judge. So I did just want to mention that as it relates to face coverings, that would be important. When I talk about wanting enforcement, it's so that we can work together. It's not that we want to be the ones enforcing things, but we want policies that are enforceable regardless of who does the enforcement. And that's why our city codes and our state laws both give public health some broad authorities, as were already mentioned.
Councilman Weigel, I found the ordinance that I was thinking of, and it's 130107. It's a general provision, but it talks about the public health officer may at any time call upon any member of the police force of the city to assist in enforcing any provisions hereof. I think it's probably relating to something within the ordinance, but it would seem logical to me that an order by the public health officer would also allow him to request assistance from city police.
Mr. Weigel, if I could ask a clarifying question about your question, perhaps it'd be a more directly relevant example to ask, who's responsible for minors ordering a drink in a bar? Is that health department or is that law enforcement, or do the two work together in that case?
I would say that's not a public health issue. I'd say that's a law enforcement issue.
Oh, so a minor purchasing alcohol is simply law enforcement, but people violating a health officer's directive in a public establishment, that's different than a criminal manner?
Well, if I can interject, Council Member Weber.
Please, any clarifications appreciated.
I think you're comparing apples and oranges here, because you've got an order by a public health officer, and as a result of that order, by state statute, it calls for criminal sanctions for violating that order.
Very good, and that's probably, that's the answer right there, isn't it? My example's not necessary then. Very good, thanks. That helps me to understand it better. Anything further, Mr. Weigel?
If the mayor chose, I know there's something in city code, I think it probably falls under 50104. It talks about the special officers and appointments and powers of those special officers. Would the mayor have the ability to appoint folks in public health to enforce the mask mandate and take it out of law enforcement's hands?
I can try and answer that question, and I'm pulling up the statute in anticipation of that question, Councilmember Weber. I don't have it right in front of me, but it talks about 440820 is peace officers have the power to enforce state laws and rules. And so my inclination here is that, again, I've got the result of this order is a violation is sanctionable by criminal statute, North Dakota Century Code. It's a misdemeanor. So I think that it would prove difficult to have a public health officer or somebody that's not in a peace officer position enforcing a criminal statute.
Perfect, thank you.
Ms. Dockler, Ms. Mock, or Mr. Vian? Anyone over Zoom with questions? Mr. Mayor, please.
Well, first I'd like to thank Dr. Walls for his work, and thanking him for allowing kind of the city to carve out its own order here for capacity. Certainly appreciate that. We're looking at the order, I think we're trying to be targeted. We're trying to target where we think most of the spread is coming from and trying to let businesses and other operations continue as they can. I do think it's a good measure. I do think it's going to take some time to see where a lot of our mitigation efforts can come into effect. I certainly do I've strongly supported masks. I do not support charging a Class B misdemeanor on not wearing masks. So that's going to have to come from the county health officer if he does that. I think that's important for me to state. I do support Dr. Walls, but I don't support a Class B misdemeanor for a mask infraction.
Mr. Kavami.
I think to probably not put words in Dr. Walt's mouth, he probably hopes that there's never an infraction that occurs. I know I hope that. I was just wondering if I could ask some technical data, and this might be Mr. Dulitz, but do we have mortality rates for the different ages in our county, that's specific data for our county? I know that Mr. Dulitz had maybe shared some of that last week.
Councilmember Kavami, I only have data for the state as a whole.
For the state as a whole? Okay.
Correct.
Would you mind sharing maybe just some of that data as it aligns with, maybe if you could pull up that slide that shows our current breakdown?
I will need just a moment.
Sure, thank you.
You should see my screen now.
We sure do.
Thank you. So with this, the 80 plus is 15.1%, is that correct?
That is correct. That's the chance of dying if you have a COVID positive test. So out of everyone who tests positive, you have a 15% chance of dying.
And that is assuming, that's across the whole state, across all demographics, any assumptions on pre-existing conditions, we can put that aside?
Yeah, it doesn't factor in pre-existing conditions either direction.
Okay, do you mind pulling up our breakdown of where we currently are in the county?
Actually, before you leave that table, Mr. Dulitz, the deaths in hospital, not total deaths. These are just people dying in the hospital. Our current total deaths are about 4 times that, right?
They are just over 500 for the total deaths, or 600 for the total deaths in
over
North
600.
Dakota. Yeah, that's the third column over is the COVID deaths. I don't know if you can see my my cursor, but there's COVID deaths and then there's deaths in the hospital.
But this is out of date at this point, right? Or
it would be slightly out of date. It's probably a few weeks out of date.
my apologies for interrupting, Mr. Kavami.
Yes, so if we could see the current breakdown, thank you.
Here's the current age breakdown. So this is based off of the rate per 10,000 for the communities. Again, that 20 to 29 age group is the biggest part of the community, as I had mentioned earlier. And so there's going to be a majority of the cases there, but what we're seeing is kind of relatively equal trajectories as far as the spread in the different age groups.
Thank you. And can you go to the slide that's the bar graph, please?
Sure.
So we're sitting at 36 at 80 plus, that's correct?
Correct.
And 15% mortality?
Correct.
So it's a little over 5 people then?
This is active cases currently, though.
So if we were to assume the same rates, we would assume that 5 of those people would die?
Based off of a very basic assumption, that would probably be relatively correct. But again, that's based off of active cases. So if, if those individuals infected other people 80 plus, like if it went through a nursing home, that number could increase.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm getting at is that Dr. Walls, I'm assuming you're not doing this lightly in issuing any kind of medical order.
It's correct. I've seen a lot of cases of people dying, and I contemplated an order a month ago and didn't do it, and we've had a terrible October, and I'm a doctor, and I'm all about preserving life. I think it's sacred, and I'm seeing too many die, and if I can make an impact on less deaths, I got to do what I think I can do to help. It's my calling.
I would agree, and I would say it's unfortunate that you have to be on this island, and so I would like to join you on that island and like to say that I support you, and I apologize that you have to do this, and that's what we've come to. I hope that as a community we can get together and say that those 5 people don't need to die. Let's put a mask on. Let's do simple things like practice social distancing. It enrages me that we can't do simple little things for our community. So I apologize you have to do this, and I hope that the rest of the city can come together and realize that this is so silly, and that even if it doesn't work, who cares? If it's a chance to save 5 people, and my 5-year-old can do it, then let's do it. So thank you, and I'm sorry you're on that island.
Thanks for that passion, Mr. Gavami. Let me add to that. Today's deaths, total deaths in the state are at 697. Roughly 7 out of every 10 people in Thompson, to give you some sort of measure, dead from this one disease since March. Someone else? Yes, Mr. Weigel, please.
I too, Kyle, I'm not opposed to masks. I wear one every day when I come here. I wear one every day when I drop my son off at school. And if I'm required to wear one, I will wear one, because I do too obey the law, and I understand if it helps, it helps. What I'm more concerned about is tonight we're about 2 hours into this meeting, and we've got medical professionals here speaking with us. Not once have I heard about mental health. I have not heard about it once. We talk about people dying of COVID, which is tragic, but have we talked about people dying of suicide? Have we talked about the death toll in our community? Have we talked about the death toll in our state regarding suicide? We have to weigh that as well, and as people that make policies, we have to weigh a lot of different things. And what I've seen is that public health hasn't been, mental health has not been weighed into this. We're not talking about it. And so we can put a mask mandate, and if that saves 1 life, fantastic. But if we lose 2 lives on the other end because of suicide, or because people are losing jobs, and because people were in domestic violence situations, we've got so many other things that we need to look at. And I think that's oftentimes lost because we're just talking about COVID. We're just talking about infection rate. We're just talking about percentages. And I really think we need to put the mental health at the forefront with COVID, because it has not been. And that's what frustrates me. I too, like Dr. Walls, I have seen death, and it is not fun. I've been there to tell families that people have died, and it is not fun delivering that news to anybody. But we're not talking about that, and I really do think we need to. I am not supportive of a Class B misdemeanor. I am supportive that if the mayor chose to issue a directive that had some sort of fine, I could get behind that. But to say that we are going to impose even the potential of a jail sentence, I am not okay with that. And that's what frustrates me about some of this stuff, is we need to look at the whole picture and not just COVID.
No, and I completely agree. And if the mayor does want to issue something like that, I could support that, absolutely. If that's something that happens, then we could have that conversation. I think that if you think of mental health, if schools are shut, I can think of my mental health, and my relationship with my kids is a lot worse than us wearing a mask. And so I agree, mental health is important, and that's in the back of my mind. My kids' education, and the education for all the kids in the entire city. So I completely agree, and if the mayor wants to do something different, I support it, and I don't like a Class B misdemeanor, but Dr. Waltz doesn't have a choice. You know, he has only the authority that he's been given by Century Code. So if we want to do something different, I could absolutely get behind that, and if that makes everybody happy, then that would be a great alternative. But without action, he's been forced to act, and we're in the situation that we're at now.
Mr. Weber, if I may.
Yes, please, Ms. Docker.
So I think there are people that have been trying to address mental health during this entire epidemic or pandemic. Social workers, certainly, nurses, teachers, counselors. There's people on the ground who are trying to address the stresses of mental health that have been put on individuals within this community. Can we be better at it? Can we have a campaign to put it front and center even more? Certainly. And I think that coming together and creating a policy working group that can focus on these kinds of things to suggest and work on actually writing possible policy to put into place during this time in conjunction with Grand Forks Public Health would certainly be helpful for us to address some of those things like mental health. But we also have to think about the mental health of our healthcare workers. How many of them, and I know that people have said, well, that everything is just anecdotal, but truly, how many of our healthcare workers are at the end of their rope? How many of our teachers are at the end of their rope? How many of our students are scared, not necessarily because they have to wear a mask, but rather because they want to stay in school, or our business owners who are seeing their livelihood slip through their fingers every time that we close early or every time we say that we're nearing a shutdown. The way that we can address a lot of that mental health is if we are forward thinking and we look at the ways that we can prevent shutdowns and we can prevent more people getting sick. And that's by having things like this. And you know, the mask resolution that was earlier introduced to the city of Grand Forks to pass, it had a fine that was written in there. It had enforcement measures. And those enforcement measures were written there for us to discuss, and yet we as a council, in order to pass something unanimously, decided to remove them entirely. We could have chosen to have a $50 fine as opposed to a $250 fine. But instead we decided to move it entirely and say, well, we're going to focus on personal responsibility. And that's largely what we've been hearing from the governor's office, and then also from our city, from us as well. Use your personal responsibility to keep people safe, but that's not enough, clearly. There are many, many people in this community who are exhausted because for the last 6-7 months, they have been doing their part, their personal responsibility to wear a mask, to social distance, to use curbside, to order out in order to try and support those small businesses. They are trying, but at this point, they are looking to the city for leadership, and we need to take that up. We were elected by constituents within our community to make some of these hard choices, not to make best friends, not
Oh, Ms. Dockler, looks like we froze up there for a moment. While we're waiting for you to come back, Mr. Vian or Ms.
run for
Ms. Moss?
re-election.
Oh, there we go.
Not to and impact the lives of our community.
Okay.
Oh, did I freeze?
You're back. It's good.
Local politics impact the lives of our community members more directly in every little way and large way. And so we really have a huge responsibility, and for the last few months, I have felt like we have just been waiting, pushing off our responsibility to the Grand Forks Public School System, to Altru, to Grand Forks Public Health, to decide for us, to tell us how to interpret all of the data that they've given us, to interpret the situation that we find ourselves in. And yes, we need their support. Yes, we need their expertise. It's not to say that we ignore that, but at a certain point, we have to take that and we have to make some decisions. And new habits, new rules, new anything like that, people are going to bristle at. We are naturally not open to being told what to do as humans in general. But for the better of our whole community, because at the end of the day, every single one of those numbers, those data points that we look at, those are people. Those are individuals. And it just floors me that we seem to think that, you know, even if it's just one person or just 5 people or just 500 people in our state, that that's okay because it's not that big of a deal. Or it is a big deal, but it's, you know, we still have 100,000 some other people that aren't affected. We either are elected to serve our community, and that includes everyone, or we're not. But I know that for me, the reason that I ran and the reason that I stay, I'm serving my term, is because I care about the people that live here, whether they vote the same way as me, whether they think the exact same way as me on certain issues. The fact of the matter is that we serve people, and we're here to make our community better, we're here to make our community safer. We can do that, but we have to step out. And tonight's our opportunity, and it's great that Dr. Walls is here and that the county is, you know, talking with us about what they're doing, but ultimately, our realm is for the city. And we have the opportunity to start making some things happen at the city level and support the county and support public health in the work that they are doing. Because again, those many layers is what's going to protect us in the end. We all play a part. And in a pandemic, we need to pull together. Isn't that what we've been saying? Safer together, yet apart. I would really like to see a policy working group come from this tonight that includes members from public health, that includes council members. I would like to see also a group from our business community, like a COVID-19 business recovery committee, to work on supporting businesses to stay open throughout this pandemic, and then also into the recovery, when hopefully we're able to get a vaccine and we've had enough time for it to take effect within our community. Because this isn't going to end just because the year turns to 2021. And so that's really, I'm not trying to cut off the discussion about what we've been talking about, but I want to start talking about things that we can affect and that we can do and we can start having for our city of Grand Forks.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. Mr. Vian or Vice President Mock? Mr. Vian.
Yeah, I'm kind of following what Ms. Dockler said. I know we've had a lot of good information, but I'm kind of, my thought today was we would focus on what we're going to move forward with, and that would be maybe the next part of this discussion. It's been great to get a better understanding. I thank Dr. Walls for what he's doing and the effort that he's taken. It was very, very important, very good for me too, but I think we're trying to find out, how do we keep our kids in school? How do we keep businesses open? How do we keep people alive? How do we keep the hospitals from being overburdened? It would be better to figure out what we can do proactively to make sure that we don't get to that point versus reacting after we're already there, and have a discussion on what that process should look like. I'd like to, proactively put again things in place that might do that. And there's many methods of getting there. And I think that way people might know what to expect as the numbers continue to get worse, or what to expect as the numbers get better. And that's kind of my hope of what we can do as policymakers, determine what that policy should look like. So I know others have ideas about how we might want to do that, but that's what I'm also looking for. The benefit of having the meeting tonight is to establish what we could and should be doing in addition to where we already are at.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vian. And Vice President Mock, any statement at this time?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I maybe didn't realize, and I apologize, if you'd like to know stress, it's doing a public meeting while you have kids and no childcare. So yes, we're all stressed. But one of the things that I'm a little surprised about is I was under the impression as the governor was moving up into colors that we were reducing our capacity at bars and restaurants. And the fact that that isn't happening is a little bit of a surprise to me. Was that always the case? And will the mayor's order start addressing that and fixing that issue?
If I could answer that
Mr. Phelan,
question.
yes, please.
The Smart Restart guidelines are guidelines. So what we've done with this mayoral order is to make them orders and to have consequences, is what we have done. We've targeted where the issues are, and we've informed those that are going to be affected from the business community. And I think because you don't have a room full of business community owners, they understand that because we've been communicating with them. And so that's kind of where we are today, is that we mean business. We've always meant business. We provide public education. We've communicated with them that, hey, now we're at 50%, and those sorts of things. And so we've done that. Perhaps it hasn't worked in all cases. I don't want to blame or shame all businesses because some have done a very good job. Okay? So this isn't about blaming and shaming and pointing fingers about that. That's why we went to the 11 p.m. closing. It was the surest way we could reduce capacity through an order, which means you got to shut down. So we have done that, and we did it a couple times. We all mean business. We've all been at this for a while.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Go ahead.
I don't want to do that either. So part of what I'd like to get done is actual policy recommendations, and I do think some businesses have been very, very impacted by this. So I guess as a council, I would maybe like to explore if we can perhaps apply part of their 2020 alcohol license fee towards 2021 to help reduce the burden on them financially, or if we can at least explore some of those things so that we can help them. I know that reduced capacity has a big impact on some of these businesses, and I hope that if we're enforcing it more strictly, maybe we would reduce our community spread some. But then I would also like to, give some efforts back to them if there's something we can do to help.
I think that's a very good idea. We've had conversations with liquor license holders. So we are working and engaging with you. You will see a proposal regarding that.
Wonderful.
We'll probably propose to reduce it into 21. Based upon that, I suspect we're going to have to probably add more things into that. So we are currently working on those. Those all will require city council approval.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, thank you for taking concrete steps. Whether we agree with them or not, you've given us some important next steps to work with, and you're not just talking about doing things, you're doing things. So thank you very much for that.
Can I say just one thing?
Yes,
real
please,
quick?
Mr. Mayor.
What we're asking for, 0 deaths, lower cases, can't happen without a shutdown. We can't keep schools open. We can't keep restaurants open. We can't keep UND open, salons, gyms, everything open, and hope that there's going to be 0 cases and no deaths. What we're looking for is some magic formula that has worked nowhere. It's time to make up our minds if we're going to find a way to get through this as best as possible or shut everything down. We're in this zone where we think we're going to find this magic formula that hasn't worked anywhere. Schools have closed almost everywhere in this country. They've opened up again, then they've closed again. We're not going to find a magic formula that nobody else has found. We either got to decide, is the goal to have 0 cases? Is the goal to have 0 deaths? Then it's to close everything down. That's the way to get there. We'll keep trying to find this balance that we think that the 7 of us in this entire world are going to find. No, we're not. If you want to take the drastic measures, then it's shutting everything down. We're going to have to find a balance. We're going to have some cases, some deaths. We can't have it all. Now, some of these measures are going to help. Certainly are going to help, but we're not going to have 0 cases and 0 deaths. And I can tell you right now, masks help. They help a lot, but it's not going to mean 0 deaths, and it's not going to mean our schools are open. And you can charge someone $100,000 for not wearing a mask. It's still not going to keep people out of the hospital and keep people from dying. So let's get real about what we're trying to do here, instead of just playing games and wasting everybody's time.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll thank you for your passion. And again, thank you for the the concrete steps you've taken. I don't believe our goal is 0 deaths or 0 infections. I think our goal is to flatten the doubling so that we can survive till we get through to the vaccine day. That's our way out of here. And so let's bring it around to what I believe are 3 important steps that the council could be engaging with. The first one, I'm going to suggest maybe this one isn't even relevant, but here it's important. I came in tonight thinking, do we need to revise our own mask resolution? Probably not. Dr. Wall's countywide mask call, we don't have the option of approving that or not approving that. That's not up to us. That's been done. That's probably off the table for us, is my understanding. We can come back to that if we need, but I believe that's been done. Second, do we want to do anything further with the mayor's most current order? Do we want to look at insisting that this move to red because that's what our public health officer is saying? Or do we give this time to find out if it's going to be the necessary measures to help flatten the curve in the meantime? And then the third thing for us tonight, regarding our own business, do we continue meeting in person? Are we essential? Is it essential that we all be here? Or do we go back to all Zoom meetings as we did back in March and April? I propose that those are 3 concrete things for us to discuss, and that first one probably doesn't even need to be discussed. Are there others that council members would like to propose to add to the list at this time?
I would just ask one question.
Sure, Mr. Weber.
Dr. Walls, are you 100% signing this order? With the
It won't look exactly like that, but for, all practical purposes, the core essence of what you probably have in front of you is what will be signed as I intend at this point. I haven't had any reasons not to go forward with it. I'm, listening and hearing, your discussions but it is my intent to sign this mandate. It's taken a while to get it this far. We had a meeting on Monday with the county commission, and it's been a work in progress since, but the legal language is I think just about there, so it is my intent to do so.
Very good. And Mr. Gaustad, if Dr. Walls signs that, am I correct in assuming that then there's not really any discussion from council members about it? Our mask resolution is in effect overridden by Dr. Walls' action?
Yeah, I mean, the enforcement of his order is by state statute and is a Class B misdemeanor. I don't think I can repeat it anymore. That's the one that's going to be enforced by police officers.
So I believe that's the end of that discussion. Yes, Mr. Gavami. Yes. Nope.
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure he was 100% in, and that I understand why he wants to do it. There's no doubt about that. I get it. The doctor wants to do something, and I have 0 issue with that. The issue I have on the is enforceability, and it'll be interesting in 2 weeks to come back and say how many citations have been issued, how many calls have come into 911. I'm interested to hear about a lot of those facts and those statistics that are going to come with it. We see Minnesota, they're starting to go up again. They've had mask mandates for quite some time. I'd love to learn more from Mr. Dulitz about that data and why it's going to be different for North Dakota. And maybe that's something him and I can have a call on tomorrow. But it's going to be interesting from here on out.
I'll say it again. You're not happy with that. You don't agree with it, but it's out of our hands, according to City Attorney Gaustad. So that leaves the next two items.
Councilmember Weber, if
Yes,
I could say
Mr.
one
Phelan,
thing.
please.
I think we have to be very careful in communicating this. The mayor has told Dr. Walls, and we respect Dr. Walls quite highly, and we meet with Dr. Walls almost every day of the week, okay, just so everyone knows that. And we appreciate him. He's a wonderful, very good man. I just want to make sure when we sign this order, okay, because I'm the city administrator, I'm in charge of this administration, okay, that we're careful because this is serious business, okay? This mask order is serious business because we're trying to prevent bad things happening related to health and to death, okay? If that's the case, I want everyone to know we're going to enforce it prudently, but seriously. And the people that are going to enforce this are sometimes some of our youngest employees who are sworn officers, okay? And we're going to put them in possibly some tough situations, okay? But if it's truly a public health danger, I think we've got to be very careful with our language to say, but yeah, we're going to be nuanced with the enforcement of this. Because we are declaring this is serious business, and when you create an order, it should be serious and it should be enforced in a serious yet prudent manner. So I just want to everyone know that.
Well stated. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. So the next item I'm proposing is, do we want to do anything further in terms of discussing the mayor's most current order? For instance, at present, we group restaurants and bars together, even though one was hit very hard by COVID in some negative ways. The other group has had, by some measures, one of their most successful years for a while. I know that restaurants have people sitting and staying put, and your order requires that in both restaurants and bars. I think that's an important part of the order as it's currently stated. But the liquor license issue, some of these liquor license holders have had very profitable years. So as we move forward with incentives, which I'm happy to hear that we're talking about, we need to consider that COVID has hit different license holders in different ways. Are there any other comments about the mayor's current order?
Mr. Weber?
Yes, please.
I do think that it's worth trying, if the capacity guidelines were just viewed as suggestions from the governor, I think it's much worth the effort to try to reduce them and see if that can help with the community spread and if that can help reduce the community spread so that they're still able to stay open and catering to customers.
Very good. Mr. Mayor, my understanding of your order is currently the reduction is to 50% capacity. My understanding from restaurant owners is 25% is not sustainable. But we have the unfortunate situation where we have some businesses have complied with all of the recommendations. They've been hurt while others have ignored them and have been quite profitable. Do you have any comment from Ms. Mock in terms of the 50% capacity?
Well, I think that's what the order is trying to solve, is that exact problem.
Very good, to create a more enforceable situation for all restaurants and bars. Ms. Mock, anything further on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of trying that and not further reducing it. I think, I guess I'm supportive of that order for what that's worth.
So what I'm hearing is a general willingness to go along with the mayor's current order, but there's been discussion about a policy working group being formed. Is that something we want to consider further?
I may, Mr. Weber?
Please, Ms. Dockler.
I would like to see that come forward, and if I needed to make a motion, I'd be happy to make a motion to create such a committee that would be assembled as quickly as possible and start working on addressing measures in conjunction with the mayor's emergency orders and looking towards the future, because it snowed today and last night, and it's cold, and we're going to be headed indoors, and that's when we're going to see these numbers start to increase, which is scary, and that's not going to keep our businesses open. It's not going to keep our schools open or our hospitals our hospitals at the ability where they're not at full capacity. And so I want to see that go as quickly as possible. I think too that I would also like to see, again, a business recovery committee that looks at ways that the business community can band together at this time, and then also to have suggestions on how to move forward and be best supported, because I know we've heavily focused on restaurants and bars, which it's true, it has been very difficult for them just by the nature of their service that they provide to the community, but businesses also include our stores that sell clothing, that sell other items, our theaters within the community. Those are businesses as well, and I think sometimes they get lost in this conversation because they too are hurting and they need to be a part of how do we move forward and support our businesses and recover again once we are able to return to a new normal.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. Mr. Phelan, Mr. Gaustad, I don't know if a motion is necessary. In fact, Mr. Phelan, whenever I've wanted to see a committee formed, I've often looked to you and sought your advice on the best way to move forward with something like that. Do you have ideas for us this evening?
Councilmember Weber and Committee of the Whole, what I hear is that the City Council wants to form a group, a committee to work with different business clusters throughout the community, and so we will do that as city staff, form that group. I think it's very important, just because that Mayor Bochansky is part of that. I think in the business community, he has high credibility and high confidence in him, so I think he should be also part of the group as the duly elected official of the City of Grand Forks.
And is this something we'd bring all council members so that every meeting is official, or do we just limit it less than a quorum?
I think what I'm hearing this evening, the City Council wants to be engaged fully. I think you should all be engaged as part of this group, a committee, and everyone should be invited. We should publicly notice all these meetings, and we're in a tough time now, so maybe we can't meet too well in person, but it probably fits a good for virtual. We get more people involved at different times of the day, so we'll get to work on that, and we may segregate some of the business groups, just because it won't make sense to pile everyone in at one.
So perhaps while we're in this, really critical stage with high infection rates, et cetera, that could be weekly, set a regular Wednesday or Thursday evening. Here it's Thursday evening.
Absolutely.
Are there other thoughts from committee members about that? Or it seems we have consent for that proposal, Mr. Phelan?
So I will all grab that, and we will do that. And of course, we're doing lots of other things, but similar to what you did with listening sessions, Mr. Weber, we'll do a similar format to that and get some feedback. And I think at the end of the day, people are going to want to see policy changes, and they're going to want to see funds, is what they're going to see at the end. Otherwise, it's just talking to talk.
Very good. And then the third item that I proposed, we can discuss this as council members, or Mr. Mayor, I'll ask you directly. In terms of doing our business in person, I heard you say on Monday night, we are administrators, we have a responsibility to be here with employees overseeing that. Council members are not administrators. In March and April, council meetings, committee of the whole meetings were all held virtually. My problem with the hybrid that we're currently using is it creates an uneven playing field. So do you have any thoughts, or should we have a discussion about that?
You can have a discussion, but haven't changed my stance on that. We're going to have city council meetings. It's important that we have productive meetings, and our city leadership comes together and has productive meetings, especially when we have asking other staff to come in and do these critical jobs. As leaders, we need to be here doing the same.
However, one of your, I don't have the order up right now, but there is, I believe, a line about those who can should be encouraging employees to work remotely. It seems that what I'm requesting, what I'm hinting at here is that work can, in fact, be more effectively done remotely, and it isn't necessary for us all to come in here.
Yeah, you're a leader, you need to show up.
Very good. Any further discussion from council members about that then?
I have, Mr. Weber, I have a question.
Mr. Vian, please.
And maybe it's for the mayor directly on this one. Mayor, you and I have had conversation in the past about root cause and trying to find out what the root cause is, or maybe what's the biggest issue that's causing these cases to accelerate. I'm going to assume when you made your latest order, that's probably where you see the biggest problem in our community with transmission. Is that right?
Yeah, the 4 areas were areas that were directed to us from public health. Yeah.
That they were, and the intent then of this order of yours is to, of course, reduce the rate of transmission and hopefully get our infections down. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you, if we don't, do you have an idea, or do you have what maybe the next root cause that might be out there that we would have to address beyond what you've done so far?
We could ask public health outside of those 4 what the next is, but they kind of were pretty clear on those 4, and that's where we tried to target. Now, I don't know what the next levels are beneath that, but we can certainly ask them. I'm not sure if they're still on here.
Ms. Swanson or Mr. Dulitz, Dr. Walls?
Mr. Weber, members of the Committee of the Whole, this is Debbie Swanson, Director of the Health Department. Well, we did prioritize those specific areas because they tend to create some clusters. For example, we've had to quarantine entire sports teams at a particular level. We see a lot of transmission at weddings. We know when we talk to individuals through contact tracing, they report having dined in restaurants or bars or spent significant time there. We know there's many other places that people might contract the virus, and we're certainly trying to eliminate some of those risks as well. But as I mentioned before, a significant number of people are reporting that they have no idea where it might have been transmitted. And part of that is because people are really out and about a lot more than we were in March, April, and May. And we really mitigated with strong isolation and quarantine when UND students came back to school. That was also happening, so we really brought our numbers down, but we never brought them down back to a baseline of where we were before. And we really have not had strong mitigation in place since that time. So I think anything we do right now will have some impact, but I do want to caution people that it's not going to happen overnight. It's probably not even going to happen in 2 weeks. It's going to take some cycles of transmission before we really see the impact. And we are right now surging, and so it's going to take a really concerted effort on everyone's part. I support the idea of going a little bit farther, but I think you need to do that carefully. But we do have some good guidance from the state guidance that could just simply be orders, perhaps. That was maybe a long answer to your question, but it's exactly what I'm feeling right now.
Council Member
Yes,
Weber.
Mr. Phelan, please.
I think this mayor is willing to act further as it gets additional information. And, similar answers that we hear, we need specifics. And because people are demanding, why are you doing this? So nuanced answers are not going to cut it. We need specifics, and this mayor will act accordingly. And just like we did today, I think this order right here, and I'm not saying maybe we're all bad examples in North Dakota, but this is the most strict order we have in the state of North Dakota today. No other city, to my knowledge, has gone to 11 p.m. bar closings. We've done it twice. And so we're willing to act further, but it's got to have some evidence, and it can't be anecdotal stories.
Is there anything further from council members tonight? This is your chance. This meeting was called for council members to hear from public health officials and to propose policy decisions.
actually like to, I don't know that we need a motion, but I would like to have a group focused on mental health.
Sure.
Councilmember Weber, if I could respond to that one too. I did receive an email this week, or was it, I think it was last week, might have been this week, I'm not sure, from the Mental Health Matters group, and they are, the question is, hey, what are we going to do? Where are we going from that? So I think they are looking for city leadership to, again, engage them and get them going. And like a lot of things in this community, they rely upon the city of Grand Forks to get them moving again. So I think that they have reached out. I was part of the email, so I will follow up with them to say if the city council, as Council Vice President Mock has said, that this council is willing to engage, but I did receive a kind of where are we at from that group.
I got to tell you, having worked, I work with social workers across the community. Of course, there are concerns about the other tangential impacts from this pandemic, including on mental health. For instance, domestic violence reports are down. The suspicion is that it's not because actual domestic violence is down, but just reports are down. There have not been 700 suicides in the state. So the idea that suicide is more important than the actual deaths from COVID is a bit of is problematic. So I think the best thing we can do for mental health during this issue is to deal with the public health issue and get it under control as quickly as possible so that mental health workers, social workers can get back to doing their job in a more direct manner. But if there is a will from council members to put together another committee to discuss mental health matters, or to just have mental health matters also considered by the committee that Mr. Phelan is already putting together, would that, yes, Ms. Swanson, please.
Mr. Weber, members of the commission, I just want to also make sure that you're aware that our department was instrumental in forwarding a grant application to one of our partners, Agassiz Associates, and they were awarded a state grant for mental health outreach during times of COVID. And I will send you the information about it. This was initiated by Michael Dulitz, and they did apply, they did receive funding, and it will be really supported through telehealth initiatives for anybody that has mental health concerns related to COVID. I also want to point out that we have been very involved in mental health matters, and Ashley Nelson was very involved, as well as Michael Dulitz, and we are aware of the concern in restarting that group or re-energizing that group, but we felt like we couldn't devote the resources to it right now with everything that we have in COVID. And as you know, Ashley and Michael are heavily involved in our COVID response. I'm also the member of a couple of different behavioral health groups that have been meeting. One is a community partners group, and then I'm also on the advisory committee for Northeast Human Services, and we met on Monday. And both of those groups are working tirelessly to ensure that services are maintained and enhanced during this period. And then, of course, it goes without saying that we have some of the best mental health experts at the University of North Dakota, and they have the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, here, and they are just wonderful resources as well. So we have a lot of resources here in the community, and we are trying to get it out to people. I think the really good news is that a pandemic environment works really well for telehealth. So telehealth can be delivered really much more effectively in mental health situations than maybe in some physical health. So do know that the health department is involved. We're concerned. We will watch the numbers, and we will do everything we can to help lift up those organizations to get resources into the community.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Yes. Well, unless there's anything further from council members tonight, I got to tell you, I came in tonight hoping for some bold, assertive, proactive measures, but I'm leaving with the sense that the mayor's more incremental approach and testing that, in fact, as Mr. Phelan has pointed out, an incremental approach that surpasses what's happening anywhere else in the state at this time, that we move forward with that. There has been movement to create another committee to review those on an ongoing basis. And unless there's anything further this evening,
Make a motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. In a second. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks.